Queen Veris of the Thessari Ascendancy was attending the quarterly diplomatic summit on Concord Prime when the first symptoms appeared. A slight disorientation during a negotiation session, easily dismissed as fatigue from the demanding schedule. The Thessari were a proud species whose complex neural-circulatory integration gave them remarkable cognitive capabilities, but also created specific physiological vulnerabilities. What began as mild discomfort escalated within minutes to something far more dangerous. During a brief recess, Queen Veris experienced sudden, catastrophic systemic failure. The kind of neural-circulatory cascade that Thessari physicians dreaded, rapid, potentially fatal, requiring immediate specialized intervention. Her medical attendants responded with practiced efficiency, but they quickly encountered a devastating problem. Concord Prime's medical facilities, while excellent for general purpose and routine care, weren't equipped for the specialized procedures required to address this particular type of Thessari physiological crisis. The nearest Thessari medical facility with appropriate expertise and equipment was 8 hours away at emergency transit speeds. Queen Veris would be dead in less than 2. Her delegation began making the grim preparations, notifying the Ascendancy government, arranging for her body to be preserved for return, beginning the political calculations about succession and what this loss would mean for their empire. Then Dr. Adrian Hayes stepped forward with what seemed like an impossible claim. "I can perform the procedure," he said to the senior Thessari medical officer who was coordinating the emergency response. The Thessari physician looked at him with open skepticism. "You're human. This procedure requires intimate knowledge of Thessari neural-circulatory integration. It's complex enough that even among our own physicians, only specialists with years of specific training can perform it safely." "I've spent 15 years studying Thessari physiology," Adrian said calmly. "My research focus is specifically on neural-circulatory integration and the cascade failures that can occur. I understand the procedure. I can do this." "Have you ever performed this surgery on a living patient?" the Thessari physician demanded. "No," Adrian admitted. "Only in simulation and cadaver studies, but I understand the theory and technique. And I'm the only option your queen has if she's going to survive the next 2 hours." The Thessari medical team exchanged glances, clearly processing this impossible situation. Allow a human to attempt a procedure he'd never performed on a living patient. A procedure so complex that failure was common even among experienced specialists. But the alternative was certain death. Queen Veris's senior political advisor, who'd been monitoring the medical crisis with growing desperation, made the decision. "Do it. If she dies, she was going to die anyway. If you save her, we'll deal with the political and diplomatic implications later. Proceed, Dr. Hayes." The surgery took 4 hours. Adrian worked with a team of Thessari medical personnel providing support and assistance under his direction, a complete reversal of normal hierarchies that was deeply uncomfortable for everyone involved. He'd reviewed every piece of research on this procedure, studied techniques from the best Thessari medical journals, practiced in simulation hundreds of times. But simulation was different from living tissue, from the reality of a patient whose life depended on every decision. Adrian operated with intense focus, translating theoretical knowledge into practical action, adapting documented techniques to the specific realities he encountered, making judgment calls about approach and methodology based on what he was observing rather than what textbooks had described. The Thessari medical staff watched with a mixture of professional fascination and barely suppressed horror as this human performed procedures they'd only seen done by their most skilled specialists. His hands were steady. His decisions were sound. His understanding of Thessari physiology was genuinely comprehensive in ways that shouldn't have been possible for a non-Thessari physician. He stabilized the neural pathways, rerouted circulatory flow around damaged integration points, administered pharmaceutical interventions to prevent secondary cascade, executed the standard procedure with modifications based on Queen Veris's specific anatomy as he encountered it. When the final monitoring equipment confirmed stable readings, when it became clear that the cascade had been halted and the Queen's systems were beginning normal recovery, the Thessari medical team experienced a collective moment of shock and profound relief. Their queen lived. Against all probability, the human doctor they'd initially dismissed as impossibly unqualified had performed what they'd considered beyond his capability. "How did you?" one of the Thessari physicians started to ask, then stopped, unsure how to even frame the question. 15 years of focused study, Adrian said simply, still monitoring the Queen's vital signs. "This is all I've researched. Thessari neural-circulatory integration, cascade failures, intervention techniques. I may not have practiced on living patients before, but I understood the theory and technique well enough to apply them successfully." He looked at the Thessari medical team. "Your queen is stable. The immediate crisis is past. She'll need several weeks of recovery and careful monitoring, but she's going to survive." The weight of what had just happened settled over the room. A human had saved the Thessari queen through unauthorized surgery, performing procedures that Thessari medical doctrine suggested should be impossible for non-specialists. Queen Veris woke slowly beneath harsh medical lighting, her senses sharpening gradually as consciousness returned in fragments. Pain first, the deep ache of surgical intervention, muscles and tissue protesting recent trauma. But it was the kind of pain that indicated treatment rather than ongoing crisis. Her body hurt because it had been fixed, not because it was failing. Awareness of location next, medical facility clearly. The distinctive smell of antiseptics, the rhythmic beeping of monitoring equipment, the particular quality of emergency medical lighting. Then awareness of presence, someone was beside her bed. She forced her eyes to focus. Not Thessari. The build was wrong, the proportions different, the features unfamiliar. Human. A human man in medical attire, looking at her with calm, focused attention. His expression wasn't performing the elaborate deference that normally accompanied any interaction with Thessari royalty. He was simply watching her with professional concern, monitoring her awakening with the kind of steady attention that suggested genuine care rather than formal obligation. And he was smiling. Not broadly, that would have been inappropriate in a medical context, but with genuine warmth that suggested satisfaction with her recovery. Before Veris could summon the presence for formal acknowledgement or command, before she could fully orient herself to the situation, the human spoke in fluent, accent-free Thessari. "Your Majesty, welcome back to consciousness. I'm Dr. Adrian Hayes. You experienced neural-circulatory cascade failure approximately 6 hours ago. I performed emergency intervention to stabilize your system. The surgery was successful. You're going to make a full recovery, though the healing process will take several weeks and will involve some discomfort, I'm afraid." His tone was professional, calm, carrying the kind of natural authority that came from genuine expertise rather than formal rank. He wasn't asking permission to explain, wasn't performing deference or waiting for her to acknowledge him. He was simply providing medical information with the clear expectation that she'd want it and would trust his expertise in delivering it. Veris tried to process this. A human had performed surgery on her. The complex neural-circulatory procedure that only specialized Thessari physicians typically attempted. Her voice was rough from intubation, but she forced the question out. "You operated on me." "I did," Adrian confirmed with that same calm professionalism. "Your Thessari medical attendants recognized that the nearest facility with appropriate expertise was too far away to reach in time. I have extensive training in Thessari physiology and the specific procedures required for neural-circulatory cascade intervention. I was the only available option with relevant expertise, so I performed the surgery with your medical staff support." He continued without waiting for her response, apparently deciding she needed information more than she needed protocol. The procedure involved neural pathway stabilization through the tertiary integration junction, circulatory rerouting to bypass the damaged sections of your integration network, and targeted pharmaceutical intervention to prevent secondary cascade development. Standard technique modified slightly based on your specific anatomy as observed during surgery. Your medical staff can provide detailed surgical records if you'd like to review exactly what was done. Veris stared at him, trying to reconcile this human's calm competence with everything she understood about the procedure he was describing. That surgery was notoriously complex. Specialists trained for years before attempting it. The failure rate was high even for experienced Thessari surgeons. That procedure is extremely complex, she managed. Our specialists train extensively before performing it. I'm aware, Adrian said. I've spent 15 years studying Thessari physiology specifically, with particular focus on neural-circulatory integration and the cascade failures that can occur. I've never performed this particular procedure on a living patient before, only in simulation and with cadaver studies. But I understood the theory and technique well enough to adapt to the practical realities I encountered during your surgery. He smiled slightly. You were an excellent patient, Your Majesty. Your anatomy aligned well with the documented norms, which made the procedure more straightforward than it might have been. I appreciate your body's cooperation during what was, admittedly, a challenging operation. The absurdity of this, a human doctor thanking her unconscious body for cooperating during unauthorized surgery, would have been almost funny if the situation weren't so extraordinary. You saved my life, Veris said, the full reality settling in. Yes, Adrian agreed simply. That was the goal. I'm pleased it worked out successfully. No false modesty, no elaborate deference, no attempt to minimize what he'd done or inflate his role. Just straightforward professional acknowledgement of successful medical treatment. Around them, Thessari medical staff were hovering at respectful distance, clearly uncertain how their queen would react to waking and finding she'd been saved by a human performing procedures they'd assumed were beyond non-Thessari capability. Veris looked at Adrian, at this human who'd calmly performed surgery that saved her life, who was now explaining her treatment with steady competence that suggested he was more concerned with her understanding her recovery than with her rank or his own status. In her years of ruling the Ascendancy, she'd been surrounded by people who performed elaborate deference, who approached her through layers of protocol, who treated her rank as more important than her personhood. And now she woke from life-threatening surgery to find a human who was more focused on explaining her medical situation than on bowing or seeking favor. You didn't ask my permission before operating, she observed. There wasn't time, Adrian said practically. You would have died before formal authorization protocols could be completed. Your senior advisor gave verbal consent for me to proceed with emergency intervention. I judged that sufficient given the time-critical circumstances. You took an enormous risk, Veris said, performing a procedure you'd never done on a living patient, on a queen, knowing that failure would have significant political consequences beyond the medical tragedy. The risk of doing nothing was certain death, Adrian pointed out. Attempting the surgery gave you a chance at survival. That seemed like the obviously correct choice regardless of political considerations or my own professional concerns about attempting a procedure for the first time on a living patient. Veris absorbed this. He'd chosen to try despite the risks, had trusted his training and knowledge enough to attempt what her own people's doctors couldn't do, had saved her life through competence and courage that had nothing to do with her rank or his formal obligations. Thank you, she said simply. You're welcome, Your Majesty, Adrian replied with that same calm smile. Now, let me explain your recovery protocol and what symptoms to expect over the next several weeks as your neural circulatory system completes its healing process. There will be some discomfort and functional limitations during recovery that you should be prepared for. He continued with professional thoroughness, explaining her treatment plan, answering questions she hadn't even thought to ask yet, demonstrating the kind of calm competence that made the extraordinary circumstance of a human saving a Thessari queen feel almost routine. 6 weeks later, after Queen Veris had recovered sufficiently to resume her duties and return to Thessari space, she announced the creation of a new advisory position, Chief Consultant for Xenophysiological Medicine, with authority to oversee medical protocols affecting the Ascendancy's leadership and to conduct research on cross-species medical collaboration. Dr. Adrian Hayes was appointed to this position. The announcement generated significant discussion throughout the Ascendancy. A human, holding an advisory position with influence over royal medical care. A non-Thessari given authority in matters affecting their government's highest levels. When senior officials questioned this decision, Queen Veris explained with the kind of certainty that discouraged further debate. I woke on a medical table after emergency surgery, disoriented and vulnerable, to find Dr. Hayes calmly explaining what he'd done to save my life. He didn't bow, didn't perform elaborate deference, didn't seem particularly concerned with my rank at all. He was focused entirely on ensuring I understood my medical situation and my recovery requirements. In that moment, she continued, I experienced something I rarely encounter: competence without ceremony, care without calculation of political advantage, authority built purely on expertise rather than formal rank or species affiliation. Dr. Hayes earned my trust by being exactly what I needed, a skilled physician focused on keeping me alive and helping me understand my treatment. That kind of earned authority, demonstrated through action in a quiet medical facility far from thrones and formal power structures, that's more valuable than elaborate protocols or ritual deference. When I remember waking to his calm explanation and genuine care for my recovery, that changes how I think about expertise, trust, and who deserves positions of influence in my government. She looked at the officials who'd questioned her decision. Dr. Hayes saved my life when my own people's physicians couldn't. He did it with competence that shouldn't have been possible according to our assumptions about non-Thessari medical capability. He demonstrated expertise, courage, and care that had nothing to do with seeking favor or advantage. That's the kind of person I want advising me on medical matters. Someone who's proven through action that they'll make the right decisions under pressure, who values outcomes over ceremony, who built authority through demonstrated competence rather than political maneuvering. The position stood. Adrian accepted it, continuing his research while advising on medical protocols and serving as a bridge between Thessari medical institutions and the broader xenophysiological research community. Years later, when asked about the human who held such unusual influence in the Thessari government, Queen Veris would tell the story of waking under harsh medical lights to find him there. Calm, competent, more concerned with her recovery than with her rank. Power and authority can be built many ways, she'd explain. Through conquest, through inheritance, through political maneuvering. But the most valuable authority is earned through competence demonstrated when it matters most. Dr. Hayes earned my trust in a quiet room far from my throne, through steady expertise and genuine care freely given. When I woke vulnerable and disoriented, he was there with calm explanation and professional competence. That memory of kindness and capability in a moment of crisis, that changes how a ruler sees the world. It reminds me that the people most worthy of trust are often those who focus on doing what needs to be done, rather than on performing deference. That expertise matters more than ceremony. That authority earned through action is more valuable than authority inherited through rank. I nearly died,